Hello again, this is Andy Torrance, founder of the Veterinary Pathology Group, and this is the second video in our series where I'm going to talk about the astonishing return of fauna to our floodplain in North West Devon. How have we monitored that over the years? Well, we visited the site perhaps once monthly, so it's largely undisturbed, and every time I go up there, I do a survey of what I see on that day. Additionally, Devon Wildlife have done several surveys as well for us to see what is there and what's happening. But more recently, there's been a real insight through the use of trail cams, much of the footage of which you see in these videos. And the trail cams, the wonderful thing about trail cams is that they reveal what the animals are doing when they're completely undisturbed, when there's no human presence within miles. And so some of the behaviours we see are really absolutely true to life. As a way of presenting this astonishing return of fauna to the site, I'm going to take you through a seasonal cycle of what our surveys and what our cameras have revealed. And I'm going to start in the first week of February. The reason I choose this is because this is the spawning time for the amphibians. When we're talking about fauna, we're not just talking about attractive and engaging mammals, we're talking about the whole range of amphibians, insects, and so on that have appeared on that site. So in the first week of February, we get a mass spawning in the ponds, primarily of frogs. Later on, we get newts and toads as well. But the frog spawning is really quite an extraordinary thing to see because it is such a massive process. We get great rafts of frog spawn across the ponds, and then subsequently huge numbers of tadpoles, which of course then feed many of the other species that depend on this ecosystem. As we move forward from the frog spawning in February, we arrive at the time when the birds start to come back from Africa on migration, and particularly the warblers are remarkable. And we have sedge warblers, willow warblers, and particularly the grasshopper warbler on the site. And they'll be birds that are flying back from Africa, and they'll be looking as they're going for sites which look like Africa. And of course, this is why even on this small piece of land, they drop in numbers. And in the early spring, the sound up there of the warblers singing is quite extraordinary. We also have wildfowl breeding in spring, particularly geese that come in, Canada geese that nest on the islands, and they regularly produce large broods of goslings, and then the cycle of summer begins. And when the breeding season is in full flow, then the raptors arrive in numbers. So we have buzzards, kestrels, peregrine falcons, particularly hobbies come and chase the swallows, and also the dragonflies over the pond. We have the owls at night. We have explosions of voles during the breeding season, which support the owls. And predators therefore thrive in that early part of the season. Throughout this time, we have deer coming through the site. And one of the things that has been revealed by the trail cams is that we actually have large herds of red deer that come through and browse the site. And as one of the principles of wilding is browsing and grazing by large herbivores, which maintains diversity and spreads seeds and everything around. This is largely where this is coming from at this site, the large herds of red deer that move through. We also obviously have roe deer on site as well, which are featured in the videos. We're looking holistically at the ecosystem through the seasons here. So we should mention the breeding of fish in the ponds. So in spring, we have the tench and the roach produce huge numbers of fry, which subsequently feed the kingfishers which come, and the large numbers of herons supported by this site. These fish also support the otters, which are specific fish eaters, and they come up the River Torridge. The River Torridge is Tarker's river, and not surprisingly, we have large numbers of otters that visit the ponds. We have some very remarkable species that are considered to be very rare now. The first is the European eel. We have these in numbers in the pond. The European eel is an incredible ancient fish that used to be so prolific in the UK that it was a sort of staple diet. Also, in the last 10 years, there's been a 95% reduction in the number of eels we have, which is thought to be due to problems in the Sargasso Sea where they breed. They have this remarkable cycle of breeding in the Sargasso. The glass eels swim across the Atlantic with the Gulf Stream, become elvers, and then come up all the rivers in the UK and settle down in ponds and even things like water troughs. They can actually travel over ground because they're relatively primitive. And there they grow to maturity before swimming back to the Sargasso. Also in spring, we have some very interesting passage birds coming through. And I remember clearly on April the 13th, 2021, sitting on the decking at our pond late in the evening and seeing a large eagle-like bird fly in. It settled in one of the ash trees on the other side of the pond, and I got the binoculars on it, and it turned out to be an osprey. We have ospreys passaging through Devon at that time of year as they move north to the nesting sites in Scotland and the north of England. As we move from autumn into winter, it's remarkable what a hive of wildlife activity is present. It's not as though it's deathly quiet in wintertime. It's full of life. The herons, the buzzards, the waterfowl, the woodcock, the snipe, the jack snipe, the deer. It's an absolute haven for wildlife through the tough winter season. And then we move around back to the spawning season of the amphibians and the year is finished. Looking at the year as a whole, I think the bird life is quite extraordinary. I haven't mentioned all the thrushes, the normal, the long-tailed tits, the blue tits, woodpeckers, all these things that are there throughout the summer season and also well into the winter. We're looking forward to the day when we see our first beaver on the ponds. We're not going to reintroduce them there, but we know that they're already on the Torridge, and so we anticipate that they'll just turn up at some point. The species I'd really like to see in larger numbers there is the watervole. The story of the watervole in the UK is a very tragic one and a very interesting one. The introduction of the American mink for mink farming in the late 1930s and the subsequent escapes led to devastating predation by the mink in the niche that they found, which was the riverbank. So they wipe out ducklings, anything that is breeding on the riverbank, and particularly they are able to go down the holes of the watervoles. Now the watervole in the UK has been present for perhaps at least 14,000 years. It's a very much loved mammal that's appeared in literature, The Wind in the Willows, of course. They used to be enormously prevalent, always a presence on our rivers. They have been driven almost to extinction in the last 50 years by the mink. And there's a huge effort now to reintroduce them around the country, but that depends on mink trapping. And ultimately we're going to have to address mink trapping on this floodplain as part of the very successful mink control programs that are starting to be achieved across the south of England to enable the watervoles to return. The other invasive species which troubles us at the floodplain is the grey squirrel. They are present in huge numbers around the UK. They're devastating to bird life because they raid eggs and chicks. But almost more worryingly, they ringbark our trees. And there's certainly a strong feeling that we may never see the great giant oaks that grow in the UK ever again, because these trees are being ringbarked at the age of 30 years by the squirrels, and they never really achieve maturity. So squirrel control is another massive challenge that we face in the UK to try and restore our trees. And I've seen some serious squirrel damage even on some of the trees that we planted on the floodplain. And although we haven't addressed control yet, we will have to. One of the reasons for doing this video series is I wanted to reach out to my colleagues in the veterinary profession and just point out to them that we are in a unique position as vets to advise farmers on the health of their animals, but also the health of the landscapes in which those animals are living and where our food production occurs. In veterinary medicine, we try to approach our patients in a way that will identify quite holistically the number of problems that are affecting it and causing the symptoms that are being presented. And so as a diagnostician, we offer a large number of tests which are logically designed to investigate the patient to the point where we can actually identify the problems specifically and address them with treatment. Now, if we apply that same thinking as a pathologist to landscapes, what we are looking for with a landscape is a sustainable landscape which maintains diversity, captures carbon, retains water, prevents flooding, and prevents pollution. And a sort of holistic approach to that, looking at the various aspects of that landscape to find out where the problems are, has real parallels with what we do in veterinary diagnosis. If you look at this floodplain, we transformed this essentially from an agricultural desert, which was drained, into this haven for diversity, carbon, flood control, and so forth. In fact, when this was part of a farm, it was a nuisance because the fences that went right up to the riverbank kept washing away in floods. It was very difficult to maintain the pasture. It was very expensive to keep the agricultural desert in place. Hedging, constant ditching, constant drainage, replacement of fences, and all for a relatively small return in terms of the grazing that was provided for food production animals. There are appropriate places to provide or produce food, and there are also inappropriate places. And I would argue that the floodplain within these river catchments is an inappropriate place to try and drive food production to the point where we extinguish the local diversity and all those important aspects that the floodplain plays in flood control, carbon sequestration, and water management. And I'm sure this is something that veterinary surgeons working around the country can actually convey to their farming clients. I am a self-confessed pondaholic, but my piece of advice to anyone advising a farmer on using small pieces of land to maximize the effective development of diversity and also improve water management is to build a pond. Ponds are the source of life. They are an incredible resource for diversity. And this is recognized by the West Country Rivers Trust and also by Devon Wildlife, who are engaged in trying to encourage farms across the whole of Devon to restore the old farm ponds that used to exist. The final point I want to make in this video on the amazing return of fauna to this site is that we're talking here about small areas within farms. We don't have to be thinking about gigantic estates for wilding in the United Kingdom. If farmers recognize that small areas by the side of rivers can have this incredible impact on diversity, carbon capture, water retention, water management, I'm sure that they'll also recognize that these areas are very difficult to bring into production and that the former is a much better option in terms of the overall health of our landscapes and therefore the health of the country. And this leads on quite nicely to our next video in the series, in which I'm going to address in some detail the measures we're taking to restore the function of this floodplain using our higher tier stewardship. And that is how water moves across the floodplain, slowing down the movement of water and increasing the amount of water on the site to actually help increase the diversity and increase the attractiveness of the landscape to wading birds.